So today we are learning about the road to revolution by looking at a timeline that led towards that revolution. We're going to look at a couple of events. What were they and how the colonists reacted to them. The first event we're going to talk about is the Proclamation of 1763. The Proclamation of 1763. So what was it about? So to prevent possible conflicts with natives, because during this time Native Americans were attacking the settlers, they were taking over their land, so they were fighting for it. So there was a lot of conflict. So the British government had to send a lot of soldiers to protect the colonists, because technically they belonged to them. So King George was like, damn, this is becoming too expensive. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to proclaim in the Proclamation of 1763, I'm going to prohibit all settlers west of the Appalachian Mountains. What do I mean by the Appalachian Mountains? Is this area right here. So right here where the end of the colonists begin, these are mountains that kind of separate the colonists to the rest of the unsettled United States. So he said nobody is allowed to cross this land. None of you settlers are allowed to move past this line. This way we avoid conflicts with the natives, and I don't have to fight another 7-year war, and I save money because damn, it's becoming too expensive. How did the colonists react? The colonists were angered, especially because they believed that the British had no right over that land. Hence, they were very independent, and the colonists wanted to expand. So remember, they planted tobacco. Tobacco takes up a lot of land. The more tobacco that they planted, the more money that they made. If the king says you can't plant more than this line, then that angered all these people that wanted to keep on planting, because that's basically saying, I'm not going to let you plant more and make more money because just because. And that angered the colonists because they felt that Britain was becoming more like a dictator. Next event is the event of 1765 called the Stamp Act. So what happened was, again, it was becoming too expensive to keep these colonists. So what the British did is that in order to pay some of the cost of maintaining the colonists, because it was expensive, a stamp tax would be required on all printed documents. So that means that on anything that was printed on paper or anything, you needed to pay a tax. And it was the first direct tax on the colonists. What is a direct tax? A direct tax is a tax that you actually see, that it comes straight out of your pocket. For example, when you go buy a bag of chips, it costs you $1.09, $1 something. Those cents, those 8 cents or plus, are a direct tax because you're paying them directly. How did the colonists react? So the colonists were super, super pissed off because nobody likes to get taxed. So the colonists defied the act, so they went against it. Where 9 out of 13 colonists agreed to boycott British goods. So they basically said anything that we have to pay a tax on that comes from the British government, we're just not going to buy it. We're going to boycott until the act was repealed. And it worked because eventually the Stamp Act was repealed, and it was placed without the colonial consent. So it worked. This was a victory for the colonists. The next event we're going to talk about is Townshend Acts, 1767. What happened was that the British it was still becoming too expensive, so they needed to make that money. So they continued to tax. So the British taxed goods like paper, glass, and tea, which was the most popular drink in the colonies, and for the British troops to protect major colonial ports, to protect customs officers. So basically, the Townshend Acts were a group of laws that were put on the colonists so that they could pay more on stuff, and also it brought more soldiers from British. So we had more British soldiers, more redcoats, and we have to pay more. How did the colonists react? Led by colonists or people like Samuel Adams, the colonists again boycotted British goods to protest the taxation without representation. But the bad thing about this is that a lot of these Townshend Acts stayed in place. So they did repeal the Stamp Act, but they stopped there. They kept the rest. So in 1770, the Boston Massacre happens. What happened was that, yes, they're getting super taxed thanks to the Townshend Acts. So the angered colonists, angered by the actions of the British Crown, they went down to the ports in Boston, Massachusetts, and started harassing the British soldiers because they saw them as, you guys are making us not, you guys are not protecting us, you guys are attacking us more, we're just gonna go give you a hard time. So they started harassing the British soldiers. A snowball accidentally hit one of the soldiers, causing him to discharge his arm, resulting in the soldiers believing that the colonists were attacking, and it became a bloodbath. So they started firing, the colonists started attacking back. At the end, there was 5 dead colonists. So the British had killed their own people, their own colonists. 5 were dead at the end of the massacre. And this is a picture of it. What was the reaction of it? This caused anger among all of the colonists. They started to see the British government as the oppressors because they're killing their own people. So it caused a group of colonists called the Patriots to launch a propaganda campaign united against colonists against the British. So the Patriots, we start to see people going against the British, the British by, for example, forming groups like the Patriots that launched propaganda or campaigns that went against British goods. So they started talking smack about the British, people like the Patriots. In 1773, we have the Boston Tea Party, the next event that led to the revolution. So what happened here was that Britain was already doing stuff that we didn't like. They were taxing us, they were killing our people. It was becoming bad. So in 1773, to save an almost bankrupt British East Indian Company, so a company that belonged to the British, a tea company, a tea act was passed that allowed the company to sell tea without paying taxes, making it cheaper. What that means basically is that this company, everybody else had to pay taxes thanks to the Townshend Acts. But what the tea act did was, hey, everybody that sells tea in the Americas, you are paying taxes except this small British East Indian Company. This small British East Indian Company that belonged to Britain, it was a British company. You could sell tea in America, but you don't have to pay taxes. This hurt American tea merchants. So for example, if I'm an American tea seller and my neighbor is the East Indian Company, I still have to pay taxes. So whenever I sell a cup of tea, it's going to cost me $2 because I have to pay taxes, I have to make money. But my neighbor doesn't, so my neighbor is able to sell the tea for cheaper. Hence, it's cheaper to, people are buying his tea more because it's cheaper. So that hurts me, the American tea merchant. Again, this angered a lot of patriots. So what they did is that they dressed up as native Mohawk Indians. So they dressed up as American Indians because, again, like they're gonna go against the British government, so they want to hide their disguise. So they dressed up as Indians. They boarded 3 British ships and they dumped 18,000 pounds of tea into the harbor. This was known as the Boston Tea Party. To show how mad they were, they dumped the tea into the harbor, into the Boston Tea Harbor. In the Intolerable Acts in 1774, the British reacted. So the acts were named, the Intolerable Acts were were meant to punish the colonists. After the Boston Tea Party, the British government was not happy. So the Intolerable Acts were passed to punish those colonists. What it did is, number one, it shut down the Boston Harbor. If you're not going to use it right, then you can't use it. Then we're not going to have it open. So that. Number two, it passed the Quartering Acts, which basically forced civilians to house troops in their homes. So in order to protect the harbor, we're gonna send more soldiers. We're not gonna pay for a hotel for them. We're not gonna spend extra money. You caused this mess, so you have to take care of them. So British soldiers would come to the Americas, and the colonists had to house them in their homes. They had to feed them. They had to give them a bed. So the Quartering Acts. And number three, it stripped Massachusetts of self-government. So in Boston, Massachusetts, where the Boston Tea Party happened, if you guys can't do things right, we're gonna take away your power of self-government. So we're gonna take complete control. You no longer have an independent government. How did the colonists react? They assembled the First Continental Congress, where 12 colonists met in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, and they wanted the colonial rights. So after all this happened, the colonists had enough, and they assembled together to form the Continental Congress, where they wanted and demanded more rights. But keep in mind, they still wanted to be part of England, they just wanted more rights. This is an example of the Intolerable Acts, how the British were forcing the colonists their rules, their laws, and everybody was like just letting it happen. So the Battle of Lexington and Concord in 1775 was that the British heard of Americans building up a militia. So the British heard that the Continental Congress was meeting, and they saw that as a threat. So what the king did is that he ordered troops to march to Concord, Massachusetts. Concord is a town in Massachusetts, to stop the uprising. How did the colonists react? Paul Revere warned the British were coming. Remember, the British are coming, the British are coming. It was the first entanglement of the Revolutionary War between the British and the troops, where the Minutemen retreated and in shame. So because they were warned, the colonists were able to prepare and send the British back. So those soldiers, those military that the king sent, they were sent back because they were warned by Paul Revere. And last but not least, the Declaration of Independence is 1776. Remember, at this point, we still want to be part of the British government. We're not trying to separate. We just want more rights. So the last attempt by the colonists was the Olive Branch Petition. The Olive Branch Petition, if you guys ever heard of extending an olive branch, that basically means, I know we have been fighting, I know we're not on good terms, and I know you guys don't like what we did at the Boston Tea Party, but hey, let's be friends again, let's stop fighting, and let's just go back to the way things were. Just give us a little bit more rights. Through this Olive Branch Petition, the British rejected it, and that would allow the colonists more freedom. So basically, the British government said, no, we're not giving you more freedom. You belong to us, and you're going to do whatever we say. This declared the colonists to be openly rebelling against the British, and they were going to send more soldiers. The British were going to send more soldiers to subdue or control the colonists. How did the colonists react? They finally had enough. The first Continental Congress met to kind of like see how we could work things out with British. The second Continental Congress met. The first one met to still trying to resolve things. The second Continental Congress met to prepare a formal Declaration of Independence. We are declaring our independence from the British Empire. It was written by Thomas Jefferson, the Declaration of Independence, that basically said, we want to be independent, we want to be free. And it was written on July 4th, 1776. That's why we celebrate our independence in 1776, because that's when we finally decided we wanted to be a country. The only thing we had to do for it right now is fight for it. We declared that we wanted to be in our own country in the Declaration of Independence. The only thing left was to fight for it.